My wife kissed her ex-boyfriend in front of our friends at a charity gala. So I quietly left without saying goodbye. 9 years later, she served me my coffee at a diner and whispered, "Please don't tell them who you are." My name's Jonas. I'm 45 now. At the time this all began, I was 36, married for 4 years to Camille, a brilliant, beautiful, and social woman who worked in public relations in Denver. She had this charisma about her. People gravitated toward her at parties. She had this laugh that cut through a room like music. You couldn't help but notice her. I was quieter. I taught high school history, the kind of guy who remembered birthdays, packed lunches, and preferred long hikes to nightclubs. We met at a mutual friend's fundraiser. I was charmed, maybe even stunned by her attention. She liked that I listened, that I wasn't trying to impress her. I liked that she made me feel like the only person in the room. We moved in together a year later, got married 2 years after that. We bought a modest home in Washington Park. Didn't have kids, something Camille said she wasn't ready for yet. I didn't push. I was patient. But looking back, I think I always knew she was searching for something more. Or maybe someone more. She was never settled. Not really. The real unraveling began on a crisp October evening. We were at a charity gala hosted at the Denver Art Museum. Camille had helped organize it, and most of our mutual friends and colleagues were in attendance. It was the kind of event where people wore tuxedos they rented just once a year, drank overpriced champagne, and talked too loudly about things they barely understood. I remember being proud of her that night. She looked stunning in this deep red gown. Her hair was pinned back in a way that made her look regal, untouchable. I held her hand as we entered, introduced her proudly to a few new teachers from my school. She drifted away at one point to check in with some clients, and I didn't think much of it. We often split up at events like this and reconnected later. I figured I'd find her near the bar, glass in hand, charming some donors. I was right. She was at the bar. But she wasn't alone. I saw her before she saw me. She was talking to a tall, silver-haired man in a navy blue suit. His hand was lightly grazing her hip as he leaned in close, whispering something that made her laugh in that familiar way. It was the same laugh she used on me when we first met. And then, just like that, she kissed him. Not a peck, not a mistake. It was deliberate, intentional, and somehow casual, like it wasn't the first time. She didn't see me watching, but my friend, Dale, did. He was standing beside me, wine glass halfway to his lips, mouth half open. "You seeing this?" he muttered. I nodded once. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't go back to our house. I didn't text, didn't call. I checked into a Holiday Inn near the interstate and sat in silence for most of the night. Over the next 48 hours, my phone vibrated almost constantly. Camille's name filled my call log. She left messages, some panicked, some angry, some begging me to call her back. I didn't respond to a single one. When I finally returned to the house, she was gone. She must have been staying with a friend. Her red dress was draped over the bathroom door, her earrings still on the nightstand. It felt wrong, seeing those things left behind like discarded thoughts. I filed for divorce the following week. She contested it, said it was a mistake, that he was an old college flame and it meant nothing, that it was just the alcohol, the atmosphere, the pressure of performing at a professional event. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just kept saying, I saw what I saw. Eventually, she gave in. We signed the papers 3 months later. She moved to Chicago. I stayed behind a little longer, but the house started feeling hollow. I quit my job, sold everything I didn't need, and spent a year drifting along the West Coast, taking odd writing gigs and working at small-town bookstores. It was peaceful, quiet. I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. I eventually bought a small fixer-upper in Astoria, Oregon, right on the edge of the Columbia River. The kind of place where people still wave when you drive past and nobody asks too many questions. 9 years went by. Seasons passed. I learned to cook better, got into woodworking, even started teaching a history class at the local community center. And then, on a rainy December evening, I stopped at this roadside diner on a whim. It was just outside of town, the kind of place with laminated menus and booths that had seen better days. I sat down, ordered coffee. The waitress brought it over, and I recognized her instantly. Camille. Her hair was darker, pulled back in a bun. She wore minimal makeup, and her figure had changed slightly. There was a tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, and a scar just below her left cheekbone I didn't recognize. She placed the coffee on the table, her hands trembling just a bit, and looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Then she said, softly, "Please don't tell them who you are." She meant the other staff, maybe the customers, maybe even herself. I didn't speak. I just watched her walk back toward the kitchen. Her posture was straight, but I could see something fragile beneath it. She didn't come back to check on me. I sat there for 20 minutes, barely touching my coffee. When I stood to leave, I left a 20 under the cup and started for the door. And just before I pushed it open, I heard her voice behind me. "Jonas, wait." I turned. She walked over slowly, arms crossed over her apron. Her eyes were glossy, but she didn't cry. "Can we talk?" We sat down in a corner booth by the window, the one furthest from the counter. The diner had quieted some. The truckers had left, and the only other patron was a woman scrolling through her phone while nursing a half-eaten pie. The rain pattered lightly against the glass beside us. Camille wrapped her hands around her own mug, though I noticed she never drank from it. She just held it, like it gave her something to do. "I wasn't sure it was you at first," she said. "You look different." I gave a short nod. "So do you." That was all we said for a while. I let the silence settle. I wanted to see if she could sit with it, or if she'd try to fill it like she used to. She did. "I didn't expect this life," she said. "Not here. Not like this." She laughed quietly, more from disbelief than humor. "It's funny how fast things fall apart when you're not paying attention." I stayed quiet. Camille looked down at her hands. "After you. After Denver, everything went sideways. The guy I kissed that night, Nathaniel, he was older, rich, made a lot of promises. Said he could take my career to the next level. Said he wanted a life with me." She finally looked up. "He ghosted me 6 months later. Just disappeared. No warning, no closure. I was left with nothing but a ruined reputation and a whisper campaign in every office I tried to walk into. I remember the kind of circles Camille used to work in. Gossip traveled fast, and it didn't need to be true to ruin you." She rubbed her forehead. "I bounced around for a while. Tried Chicago, then Minneapolis. Seattle. Took jobs beneath me. Lost most of my friends. The ones who stuck around. They weren't really friends. They just liked having someone else's wreckage to talk about." "And here?" I asked. She shrugged. "A story is quiet. Cheap rent. Nobody knows me here. I work 2 shifts. One here, one at a bakery in the mornings. It's not glamorous, but I pay my bills. Most weeks, anyway." She gave me a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No more red dresses. No more galas. Just pancakes and coffee." I wanted to ask her why she kissed him that night. Why she chose that moment. But part of me knew it didn't matter anymore. The moment was done. The damage was permanent. Still, she answered the question I hadn't asked. "I thought I deserved more. That's the truth of it. I thought you were safe. Too safe. And I wanted something reckless. Something that would make me feel alive again." She paused. But I didn't realize that I already had everything. I was just too shallow to see it. I looked at her then, really looked. Not like someone I used to love. Not like someone I hated. But like a person I didn't recognize anymore. A person who used to live in the same skin as the woman I once knew. Camille shifted uncomfortably in the booth. "I didn't call you tonight to make you forgive me. When I saw your face, something broke inside me. I realized how long it's been since someone saw me for who I really am. Not Cam. Not the waitress. Not the screw-up. Just me." I nodded slowly. "And what do you want me to do with that?" She hesitated. "Nothing. Just don't tell anyone who I am. Please." We sat there, the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the sound of plates clinking softly behind the counter. I could see the cook peering out through the pass, probably wondering why the waitress was sitting across from a customer at nearly midnight. Eventually, Camille stood. "You probably won't come back here. I get that." She didn't sound bitter about it. Just resigned. Like she'd already played the scene out in her head and accepted it. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "I really am." I nodded. "You too." She walked back behind the counter and disappeared into the kitchen. I stayed in the booth for a few more minutes. Watching the rain. Watching the woman with the pie leave. Watching the empty diner slowly sink back into silence. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I hadn't meant to, but my mind kept playing back Camille's voice, the way her fingers had trembled around her coffee mug, how her eyes darted toward the cook every time she spoke, like she was afraid someone might overhear her shame. I hadn't felt anything sharp. No anger, no bitterness, but something dull and heavy sat behind my ribs. I made breakfast, fed the dog, and stood at the sink looking out at the fog that rolled across the river like a slow-moving wave. I told myself not to go back to that diner. And yet, 2 days later, I did. Not out of curiosity or some buried affection. I think I just wanted to see if it had all really happened. If Camille was really working the late shift at a roadside diner just outside Astoria. Maybe I even thought she might not be there. Like seeing her had been a strange dream tied to my past, the kind that fades after a strong cup of coffee and the rising sun. But she was there. Same apron, same tired smile. She looked up when I walked in and froze for just a second before returning to wiping down the counter. She didn't acknowledge me right away, just gestured toward a booth with the flick of her chin. I sat down. A few minutes later, she came over. "Coffee?" "Sure." She poured it in silence. This time, no quiet whispers. No fragile confessions. Just the clink of the ceramic cup on the Formica tabletop. "Thanks," I said. She nodded, turned away. And that's how it went for the next few weeks. I'd stop in once every few days. Sometimes late. Sometimes in the middle of the afternoon. Sometimes she was there. Sometimes she wasn't. But when she was, we talked. Not always about anything deep. Sometimes just about the weather, about the obnoxious regulars, about the strange woman who came in every Tuesday with her pet parrot on her shoulder. But as the conversations stretched longer, the things left unsaid started to shift. Camille never asked me about my life in detail. She didn't press. She knew better than to pry. But once, while refilling my cup, she said, "You look like someone who figured it out. That's good. You deserved a better second act." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. I don't think I have it figured out. I just live quieter now. Simpler. My life is filled with routines and small joys. My dog, the bookstore I work in part-time, my Tuesday morning crossword, and Friday night fish tacos at the pier. Camille, meanwhile, still moved like someone waiting for something to hit her. She never talked about her family. I asked once if she kept in touch with anyone from Denver. She just shook her head. They knew what happened. No one wants the baggage that comes with staying friends with the villain. That word, villain, sat uncomfortably in the air for a long time. I told her I didn't see her that way anymore. It was true. I had once. But that fire had long burned out. What was left was something more complicated and, somehow, more hollow. One night, when the place was empty, she sat with me again. No pretense, no poured coffee. "I almost called you," she said. "A few times over the years. Got your number once from an old mutual friend. Had it in my phone for weeks. Why didn't you?" I didn't think I had the right. We sat in silence for a while after that. Outside, a semi-truck rumbled past, its headlights painting streaks across the windows. Inside, everything felt smaller than it used to. Time had closed in around us. Camille sighed. "You know the weirdest part? After everything, I still remember how you always made the coffee just a little too strong. And how I pretended not to like it, but secretly did." I smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first truly human thing she'd said in days. "Some things stick," I said. She nodded. "Yeah, they do." She stood to go but paused. "I don't expect anything. I know we're different people now. I'm glad you came in that night." I didn't answer right away, but I looked at her and nodded. "Me too." She gave me a half smile, then turned and disappeared behind the swinging door that led to the kitchen. It was the first time I realized that maybe she hadn't just asked me to keep quiet that night out of fear or shame, but maybe because, in that moment, she had finally found a place where people didn't define her by what she did nearly a decade ago. I started visiting the diner more regularly after that. Not every day, and never at the same time. I didn't want to create a pattern, and I didn't want to send a message, at least not when I didn't fully understand myself yet. Sometimes I'd walk in and she'd be in the middle of her shift, moving between tables with that same weary rhythm, the kind that people wear after years of showing up whether they feel like it or not. Other times, I'd catch her just ending a shift, hair coming loose from its bun, hands red from hours of washing dishes and wiping down tables. And every now and then, if the place was quiet enough, we'd talk. Not like exes, not like friends, even. Just two people who shared a history, sitting across from each other in the middle of lives that had taken very different roads to the same quiet place. One afternoon, during a lull between the lunch and dinner crowd, she slid into the booth across from me with a soda in hand. She looked tired, like always, but the kind of tired that's become familiar, almost comfortable. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you stayed?" she asked, not looking at me. I stirred my coffee. "No, not really." She nodded. "I do. Not because I think it would have worked out, because I know it wouldn't have. But I wonder what kind of person I would have been if you hadn't left when you did." I didn't say anything. What could I say? Camille exhaled slowly. "You walking out that night. No yelling, no slamming doors, no dramatic scene. It broke me more than if you had screamed in front of everyone. I kept expecting you to come home, to fight me, to give me something to push against. But when you didn't, it was like looking at a mirror that had already cracked, and there was no point pretending it hadn't." I remembered that night too clearly for comfort. The way the cold Denver air had hit my lungs as I walked out of the museum, the silence in the hotel room as I sat on the edge of the bed still wearing my tie, staring at nothing. "I didn't leave to hurt you," I said. "I left because I knew if I stayed, I'd never respect myself again." She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "I know, and I don't blame you. I didn't then either. I just didn't know how to live with it." There was something tally honest in that moment. And still, no apologies. She wasn't trying to ask for redemption, and I wasn't offering any. We were both just sifting through the wreckage of what used to be. That day, for the first time, I noticed a ring-shaped scar on her right hand, near her knuckle. I didn't ask about it, but I realized in that moment how much I didn't know about the years that followed for her. About the people who came and went, the apartments she'd probably had to leave, the nights she might have cried herself to sleep or drank too much trying to forget. Camille broke the silence after a while. "Sometimes, I still wake up and expect to smell your coffee in the kitchen. And then I remember I don't live in that world anymore." I didn't know if that was meant to hurt me, or just to confess something she hadn't told anyone else. Either way, I let the words hang between us without trying to patch over them. Later that week, it snowed, rare for Astoria, but not unheard of. I walked by the diner in the evening, not planning to go in, just passing through on my way to the pier to watch the lights reflect off the icy water. Through the window, I saw her wiping down the same corner booth we always sat in. The place was nearly empty. She looked up briefly and caught sight of me, gave a small nod, not an invitation, just an acknowledgement. I kept walking. For a while, I tried to keep some distance. Not because I didn't care, but because I was beginning to realize something dangerous. It was easy to fall back into the comfort of familiarity, even if that familiarity was built on something fractured. But Camille, she'd changed. That much was clear. She didn't wear makeup anymore, didn't talk about the next big client, didn't scan the room for attention like she used to. She just worked, paid her bills, and kept her head down. She existed like someone who had once burned brightly and now flickered quietly, trying not to go out. And me? I didn't feel broken anymore. But I wasn't whole either. I had rebuilt, yes, but the blueprint had changed. And the man who'd once packed her lunch, remembered anniversaries with carefully written cards, and picked up her dry cleaning without complaint, he didn't exist the same way anymore. One night, she surprised me. I had just walked into the diner, and she slid a plate of pancakes across the counter before I could even sit down. "On the house," she said. "You always used to ask for them when you were too stressed to eat anything else." I raised an eyebrow. I was stressed a lot, wasn't I? She smiled, genuinely this time. "Yeah, but you never made anyone else feel it." I didn't know what to do with that. I took the plate and sat down, suddenly more aware than ever of how much time had passed, and how none of it seemed to matter when she looked at me that way. That was the moment I started to realize that this wasn't just a series of random encounters anymore. It happened in pieces. A shared coffee after closing, her sitting on the curb with a cigarette between her fingers, even though she barely smoked anymore. Her telling me about a small poetry book she used to read before bed when we were married, how she had found it again in a thrift shop, and how it made her cry in the parking lot. She started asking about my life, not in a nosy or invasive way, just curious. I told her about the dog, the community center classes, the woodworking projects in my garage that I never quite finished. I told her about the bookstore and how I'd helped organize a little local history club with a group of retirees who still thought the Cold War was the pinnacle of excitement. One night, she said, "You always belonged in a slower life, didn't you?" I shrugged. "I think I just got tired of trying to keep up." She smiled at that. "I always thought you were trying to slow me down, but maybe I was trying to speed you up." We both sat with that for a long time. Then, one day, I walked in and she wasn't there. The diner owner, a heavy-set man named Lloyd who mostly kept to himself, was behind the counter. When I asked where Camille was, he looked up briefly. "She quit. Just like that. No note. No goodbye. No explanation. She leave a message or anything?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Nope," he said, wiping down a counter. "Said she had to go take care of something out of town. Didn't say where." I stared at the empty booth where we always sat. I don't know how long I stood there before I left. The following week felt strange, like I'd lost something that wasn't mine to lose. I checked the bakery she worked at. No sign of her. I asked around a little, discreetly, but no one had heard from her. It was like she'd evaporated. But Camille was never the type to disappear without a reason. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, her name showed up again. Not in the local paper, not in a phone call, but in a newsletter. An alumni bulletin from a business school in Chicago. A small blurb tucked between two engagement announcements. Camille Renard joins Bellamy and Crane PR as an associate director in strategic accounts. I blinked twice. Read it again. Same name. Same person. A firm she'd once called her dream job. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. So that was her endgame. And that's when I realized she hadn't just left to escape her life. She'd left because someone had finally come calling. Someone had seen enough in her to give her a second chance, and she didn't want to risk it by being tethered to the version of her that used to serve pancakes at a diner. I could have left it there. Let her have her fresh start. Let her reinvent herself once again in a city that knew how to forget. But I didn't, because what she'd said the night we reunited kept echoing in my mind. "Please don't tell them who you are." That wasn't fear of me ruining her life. That was guilt. That was knowing, deep down, that if anyone found out who I was, what she did to me, that carefully rebuilt house of cards would collapse. So, I made a few calls. Not to ruin her. Not to destroy her. Just to make sure the truth was part of the foundation this time. I reached out to a former colleague of mine, Nora, now a journalist in Chicago working freelance PR and politics profiles. She owed me a favor. We'd worked on a city history project together years back. I gave her Camille's name, filled her in on the pieces of the story that mattered, and asked her to dig. She didn't need much. A few phone calls. A quick check through employment records. A couple discreet interviews. A month later, the piece dropped. The long road back. When a PR star burns out and rises again. But at what cost? It wasn't a hit piece. It was fair, balanced, even. But it didn't hide anything. The Gala. The Scene, the Whisper Networks in Denver. The brief disappearance. Her job waiting tables under an alias in a small Oregon town. All of it. Verified. Documented. With sources. The article painted Camille as a woman who made mistakes, yes, but who'd hidden from them instead of owning them. Her new firm was mentioned too. In context, the story went quiet for a week. Then I saw the press release. Camille was stepping back to focus on personal growth. Standard PR lingo for "we're parting ways" and saving face. That same day, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just 4 sentences. Jonas, I deserve that. I hope you're finally at peace. I read it once. Then again. And again. There was no anger in me. No triumph. Just a strange, clean calm. Not from revenge, but from knowing that the truth was finally out there. That the scales had been balanced. I didn't reply. What would I say? Instead, I took the letter out back, lit it on fire in a small ceramic pot I used for burning old bills, and watched the ashes lift into the air like everything else I'd once carried. Camille went quiet again after that. I don't know where she is now. I don't need to. Some people want redemption. Some people want a clean slate. And some people just don't want anyone to remember who they were. I'm good. I still walk down to the pier on Friday nights. I still teach. I still read history like it holds all the answers. And now, when I walk past the diner, I smile. Not because I miss her, but because I don't have to anymore. That was the real revenge. I healed. She didn't.